We got Nate Tibbetts taking the podium, man. I really want to know what's the reason for Caitlin Clark being benched in this championship game. I really want to know. Let's take a listen to what Coach Nate Tibbetts had to say, man.
Did Team USA create this whole mess the second they benched Caitlin Clark? Comment yes or no, because what happened next turned a simple lineup decision into one of the biggest talking points in women's basketball. This was supposed to be about Team USA winning. Instead, it became about why one of the most dangerous players in the world kept getting treated like a role player. And the wildest part is this. The more they tried to limit Caitlin Clark, the bigger she looked by the end of the tournament.
I gotta look at y'all with the side eye right now. I gotta look at them with the straight up side eye right now as Caitlin Clark was benched in the championship game for the United States. Absolute joke. Absolute joke.
That is why this story blew up. Not just because of the benching, but because the benching made no sense once you saw what happened on the court. Clark came into this run after a long layoff and still ended up winning MVP.
Cheers. How about it? Oh, no, they mad. They big mad. They are flaming right now. Caitlin Clark in her return to basketball, like 8 months off, all these injuries, all of this stuff. The girl shows up and wins MVP just like that.
Team USA finished 5-0, and she averaged 11.6 points and 6.4 assists per game in her first games in 8 months. Think about how insane that is. Most players after that much time away are just trying to find rhythm again. Caitlin Clark came back and looked like the most impactful player in the tournament. But instead of fully handing her the keys, the coaching decisions made this whole thing feel strange from the start. They had a generational point guard, but instead of putting the ball in her hands and letting her control the game, they used weird lineups, played her off the ball, and made it feel like they were trying to take away the exact thing that makes her special.
Caitlin Clark is the real MVP, and this wasn't based on fan voting, I don't think. This is the real deal. This is the real deal. Let's take a look at what she did. First in points, first in assists, first in true shooting percentage, first in plus minus, first in 2-point field goal percentage. Caitlin Clark doing what the GOAT does. Get this CBA signed, because this is just the beginning. This is just the beginning.
And that is where fans started to lose their minds. Because once people saw the starting lineups, this stopped feeling like normal coaching experimentation and started feeling personal. It felt like disrespect. Other players were getting trusted first, while Clark, the player drawing the most attention and changing the energy of the team, was coming off the bench or being treated like a second option.
CC is the GOAT. We've been telling y'all, and it is what it is. Caitlin Clark is the MVP of the 2026 FIBA Women's World Cup. How about that? We had Kara Lawson trying to bench the girl. They putting her in with all these funky, funny lineups. They keep starting Chelsea Gray every game. They got her coming up. They had Angel Reese start a damn game before. Paige Becker started before. Shit, they might have put me in a game. Pardon the language. They might have started me in a game before Caitlin Clark, okay? This was absolute insanity, but this is a beautiful sight to see, okay? Caitlin Clark got her feet wet. She got a taste of it again, okay? She got her legs under her. She got that confidence. Y'all see that long three falling, hitting nothing but nylon? Listen, Caitlin Clark is about to do it to him this year. She about to do it to him this year. You can play games and act like you don't know, but deep down, you already know what time it is.
And fans could feel it, because every time Clark stepped on the floor, the game changed. The pace changed. The spacing changed. The defense had to react differently. That is what made this so explosive. If Clark was struggling, maybe the staff could defend it. If Clark looked overwhelmed, maybe the benching angle would make sense. But that is not what happened. She thrived anyway. She won MVP anyway. And that is the kind of outcome that makes every earlier coaching decision look worse in hindsight. That is why this story kept growing, because it was not just about basketball anymore. It became a story about control, about who gets trusted, about whether some coaches and power structures still seem uncomfortable with how quickly Caitlin Clark has taken over the sport. And once fans believe a player is being held back on purpose, every coaching decision gets judged through that lens. That is when the pressure becomes massive. Because in sports, you can survive a loss. You can survive one bad game. What is harder to survive is making a decision the public thinks is obviously wrong, than watching the player prove that public right. That is the real fallout here. Benching Caitlin Clark turned into the kind of decision that can define a coach. Because if you try to shrink a star like that, and she still ends up as the biggest story, the question becomes brutal. What exactly were you trying to accomplish? And that is the lesson sitting underneath this whole Team USA story. Do not overmanage Caitlin Clark. Do not force her into roles that take the ball out of her hands. Do not build a system that suppresses the very thing that makes her special. Build around it. Support it. Get out of the way. Because when coaches try to correct Clark's style, it does not help the team. When they trust her, the offense changes. The energy changes. The results change. And this is why the MVP matters so much. It was not just a not with talking, not with excuses, with results. 5-0 as a team. MVP. 11.6 points, 6.4 assists. First games in 8 months. That is not hype. That is proof. So when people ask why this story exploded, that is your answer. It exploded because Team USA tried to manage Caitlin Clark like she was just another piece. But by the end of the tournament, she looked like the center of the whole thing. That is why fans kept talking about the lineups instead of just celebrating the wins. And that is why any coach watching this should take the lesson seriously. You do not build around Caitlin Clark by shrinking Caitlin Clark. You build around her by trusting what is obvious. Because the more they tried to hold her down, the bigger she became. And that might be the most important part of this entire story. Team USA may have won the games, but Caitlin Clark won the argument. If you're still watching, comment yes if you think Team USA got this wrong from the start.
Team USA sweep the World Cup qualifiers with their 5th straight win against Spain, and Caitlin Clark gets MVP for the FIBA World Cup qualifiers.
In what should be a surprise to absolutely nobody, Caitlin Clark has been named most valuable player. Puerto Rico got into the World Cup. Wow.
Did Caitlin Clark just prove she is the biggest needle mover in women's basketball? Comment yes or no if you think she did. Caitlin Clark had not played a single basketball game in 239 days. No rhythm, no real run, no chance to ease back in, and after all that time away, Team USA still did not start her in the first game.
Well, it's what we've all been waiting for. It's been 239 days, I believe I saw, since Caitlin Clark has been on a basketball court hitting a three-pointer. Today we were all witness. Caitlin Clark is back. She did not start for USA Basketball, for Team USA. The response to that is, yeah. And I knew it would be.
But somehow, that made what happened next even louder. Because Clark came off the bench in her Team USA debut, played just 19 minutes, dropped 17 points and 12 assists, and instantly helped turn this FIBA qualifying tournament into must-watch TV.
Caitlin Clark had a berserk 17 points. Wow. 4 of 5 from three-point range, 12 assists in 19 minutes and 21 seconds. Absolute, pure, unadulterated domination.
According to the source material, the 5-team USA games pulled the highest viewership numbers in FIBA qualifying tournament history. And that is what makes this whole conversation impossible to ignore. That is also why the Angel Reese angle got so much attention. Not because the source proves Angel Reese literally said she was furious. It does not.
Just when we thought Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark saga was over, no beef, no nothing. Oh man, footage is starting to hit the internet, man. So basically there's articles starting to come out as of right now about Angel Reese ignoring Caitlin Clark, pretty much not showing her any love during that last matchup. Now, Angel Reese ignores Caitlin Clark multiple times in Team USA win, and video proves it, bro.
But because the comparison is brutal, the same wider women's basketball world that spent months trying to argue Caitlin Clark was not the main draw suddenly had to watch Team USA become a ratings event the second Clark put that jersey on.
And I did see that the MVP did come out, and guess who it is? Caitlin Clark! Wow! They also did an All-Star 5, which consists of Megan Gustafson, Cecilia Zandalicini, Caitlin Clark, Kelsey Plum, and shocker, 4 out of 5 play for the WNBA. FIBA has really been promoting Caitlin. They were showing so many highlights on their socials, and I think that it was a very good decision because honestly, she may not have scored the highest points in every game, but her impact on the game and the tempo that she creates in every game and the excitement that she creates in every game is undeniable.
That is where the real story starts. Because before Clark ever touched the floor, there were real questions. 8 months away from competitive basketball is not a small layoff. There had been injuries, missed time, and an entire stretch where fans were left waiting. There were questions about rust, questions about timing, questions about explosiveness, questions about whether she would need a few games to look like herself again. That is the context people need to remember. This was not just another debut. This was a return after a long silence. Fans had spent months waiting to see whether Clark would still bend the game the same way, whether the passing vision would still be there, whether the pace would still feel different, whether the gravity would still show up the moment she crossed half court. And then she checked into the Senegal game. That was it. The entire tone changed. In 19 minutes off the bench, Clark finished with 17 points and 12 assists. The source also says she had 0 turnovers in the first half and broke 5 FIBA records before even hitting the 20-minute mark. 2 of those records stand out the most. Most assists ever by a bench player in FIBA history, and most assists in a Team USA senior national team debut, men or women. That is not hype. That is a historic first impression. But the numbers only tell part of it. The real proof was in how the floor looked once she entered the game. Clark was reading the blitz before it arrived, turning pressure into transition, finding cutters in rhythm, and hitting shooters exactly where they wanted the ball. The offense looked faster, sharper, more connected. The second she stepped on the floor, Team USA looked different. That is why the rust conversation died so fast. It was supposed to be understandable if Clark looked hesitant. It was supposed to be reasonable if the timing was off. Instead, she walked into international basketball after 239 days away and made the entire game look simpler for everyone around her. That is not normal, and that is why so many people immediately started asking the same question. If she was clearly changing the game that much, why was she still being used like just another piece? That tension sits right in the middle of this whole tournament. Clark comes off the bench, breaks records, changes the pace, makes the offense more dangerous. And yet the team still did not immediately hand her full control. That is the frustration. The numbers on the floor were pointing one way, while the rotation decisions sometimes seemed to point another. And that is the basketball argument here. Not that Team USA was bad, not that Clark had to take every shot, but that when she ran the offense her way, the results were obvious. The pace improved, the reads improved, the spacing made more sense, and the team became much harder to guard. The Italy game felt like the clearest proof of that next step. Clark was at her most efficient in the Italy blowout. That was the game where the offense was built more around her strengths. The 3-guard look with Clark, Paige Buchers, and Kelsey Plum looked dangerous. Italy had no answer for it. And that matters because it changes the story from one hot game to a real blueprint. This was not just Clark checking in, getting hot, and creating one viral box score. Across the full 5-game sample, the source says she finished with 58 total points and 32 assists. She averaged 6.4 assists per game, which led the entire tournament. She played 21 minutes per game as a bench player, which was a Team USA high. She also led Team USA in 2-point percentage, free throws made and attempted plus-minus and efficiency. Those are not nice return numbers. Those are, this player is controlling the tournament numbers. And the plus-minus point matters. When Clark was on the floor, Team USA became almost impossible to compete with. That is one of the cleanest ways to cut through role arguments and minutes debates. Whatever the rotation said, the impact said something else. Now bring that back to the ratings conversation, because this is where the Angel Reese title makes emotional sense, even if the stronger factual case is really about audience power. The source argues that Clark's Team USA return pulled viewership levels that embarrassed the numbers from Unrivaled and silenced the idea that interest in women's basketball is spread evenly across all stars. Its point is simple. The second Clark came back, the audience jumped. That is the uncomfortable part. It is one thing for Clark to play well. A lot of people can shrug that off and say, she is talented. Fine. But when the ratings move with her too, that becomes a different conversation. That becomes market power. That becomes proof that fans were not just waiting for women's basketball in general. They were waiting for this player. And that is why this tournament felt bigger than Puerto Rico, bigger than qualifying, and bigger than one record list. It felt like a reminder that Caitlin Clark is not just a scorer. She changes tempo. She changes spacing. She changes what defenders panic about. She changes how teammates get the ball. And according to the source material, she changed the size of the audience too. That is a rare kind of influence. Then came the final stamp, Tournament MVP. At that point, the award almost felt like a formality. The debut already told the story. The full tournament numbers already told the story. The ratings already told the story. The only thing the trophy did was make it official. So no, the biggest takeaway here is not whether Angel Reese personally liked any of this. The biggest takeaway is that Caitlin Clark came back after 239 days away, came off the bench, broke records anyway, won MVP anyway, and dragged the sport's attention right back toward herself anyway. That is what really happened in this tournament. And if Team USA truly learned from it, the next step is obvious. Stop treating Clark like a piece you need to carefully blend in. Build around what she does best. Let everybody else benefit from it. Because every time this tournament gave Team USA a choice, the same answer kept showing up. When Clark touched the ball, the offense got better. When Clark played, the numbers got bigger. And when Clark returned, the whole conversation changed. So let me ask you one more time. Did Caitlin Clark just prove she is the biggest needle mover in women's basketball? Comment yes or no. Just quietly admit Caitlin Clark cannot be benched anymore. Comment yes or no if you think they did. Because after what just happened in this FIBA qualifying run, that question does not feel dramatic anymore. It feels obvious.
After being away from the game for nearly 9 months, away from competitive action for nearly 9 months, Caitlin Clark comes back and wins FIBA qualifier MVP. While all the other players are staying fresh, staying in the groove, going down to Unrivaled, playing 3v3 gimmick basketball, Caitlin Clark's recovered.
8 months off the floor, fighting illness, coming off the bench in 4 out of 5 games. And Caitlin Clark still walked away as the youngest MVP in FIBA qualifying tournament history. That is not just a nice headline. That is a statement. Because this was not one hot quarter, it was not one lucky night. This was 5 games of proof that Team USA looked different when Clark was on the court. And the final game against Spain may have ended the whole bench debate for good. And the wild part is, Spain actually helped make the case.
Clark lived up to the billing by delivering an excellent display for the reigning champions. All this and only started 1 game. Oh, the coaching. My God, they look like a bunch of clowns. Taking the U.S. to a 5-0 sweep, Clark impressed with her guard play as she when she was allowed to play guard for the I don't know, 15 minutes in the entire tournament. The rest of the time, it seemed like she was playing small forward.
Because early in that game, Team USA did not look comfortable. Spain came in organized, confident, and ready to make this ugly. Their young players were attacking the paint, pushing the pace, and forcing Team USA to work for everything. The score kept swinging in the first quarter. And by the start of the second, the game was tied against a Team USA group that had been rolling through the tournament. And while all of that was happening, Caitlin Clark was sitting on the bench. That is the part fans could not ignore.
Caitlin Clark today, not in the starting lineup. Oh, what a surprise. What a surprise. At this point, I would have been surprised if they would have put her in the starting lineup. But you know what we saw today? We saw her play everywhere. We saw her play small forward. We saw her play shooting guard. We saw her play off ball. We saw her play power forward. We saw her stand in a corner. We saw it all. We saw Caitlin Clark defend a 6'4" power forward. What are we doing?
4 out of 5 games in this tournament, Clark came off the bench instead of starting. So people kept asking the same question: why is your best floor general not on the floor? Against Spain, that question got even louder because the offense looked slow. The ball movement looked sticky. The pace was flat. Spain was mixing defensive looks, throwing pressure at the ball, and Team USA looked like it was playing in mud. Then Clark checked in, and the game changed. Not in some vague, feel-good way. It changed in ways you could actually see. The tempo jumped. The pressure Spain was using started turning into fast break chances for Team USA. Clark was reading the defense before it even got set. She was finding the kickout pass, pushing the ball ahead, and forcing defenders to pick their poison. Because once she starts pulling up from that kind of range, the entire defensive structure stretches. You cannot sit back. You cannot load up in the paint. You cannot casually recover. Everything starts bending around her. That is what makes Clark different. It is not just the shot. It is what the shot does to the floor. It drags defenders into places they do not want to be. And once that happens, every pass gets easier, every driving lane gets wider, and every rotation gets harder. Spain was hanging around when Team USA was bogged down. But once Clark got control of the rhythm, the whole game opened up. And that is why the final score, 84-70, almost hides what really happened. It sounds comfortable. It was not comfortable until Clark helped make it that way. That is the real story here. This was not Team USA cruising to a win and everybody playing their part equally. This was Team USA getting dragged into a real game, then looking like itself again. Once Clark started bending the game in his favor, every meaningful scoring run in that Spain game came with her on the floor. That matters, because when a close game turns the moment one player enters, that is not random. That is value. And once you step back and look at the full tournament, the case gets even stronger. Clark averaged 11.6 points per game across 5 games. She averaged 6.4 assists per game. That gave her 32 total assists for the tournament. She led Team USA in 2-point field goal percentage. She led them in free throws made. She led them in free throws attempted. She played more minutes than anyone else on the roster. Think about that for a second. The player they kept benching to start games was also the player they trusted most once the game was actually unfolding. And it gets even better. Clark did not just lead Team USA in plus-minus. She led the entire tournament. Every nation, every player, everybody in Puerto Rico. When she was on the floor, Team USA outscored opponents by a margin nobody else in the field could match. Her efficiency rating also led the entire tournament, not just Team USA. The entire field. That is not a popularity contest. That is not people being dazzled by her name. That is 5 games of numbers saying the same thing the eye test was saying. She was the most impactful player there, and that is why the MVP matters so much. Because this award was not handed to Clark just because she is Caitlin Clark. It came while she was still being used in a way that never fully matched her impact. It came with an All-Star 5 selection beside it, and now this is her second MVP in a FIBA-sanctioned tournament. That turns this into a pattern, not a one-off. So what does all of this mean now? It means Team USA may have learned something it could not keep dancing around. You can experiment with lineups. You can spread out touches. You can try to balance roles. But when the game gets real, when the offense gets stuck, when the pace disappears, and when the other team starts believing, Caitlin Clark changes the temperature of the game. She speeds it up. She stretches it out. She creates decisions defenses do not want to make. And once she does that, everything starts flowing again. That is not a luxury. That is the engine. And that is why this should excite Indiana Fever fans too. Because if this is what Clark looks like after time off, after illness, after inconsistent starting decisions, and still adjusting back into rhythm, what does a fully healthy, fully unleashed version look like next? What does 2026 look like if Team USA stops overthinking this and simply puts the ball in her hands from the jump? What does the WNBA look like if this version of Clark carries this confidence straight into the Fever season? That is where this gets dangerous for everybody else. So let me ask you again. Did Team USA just quietly admit Caitlin Clark cannot be benched anymore? Because after the Spain game, after the sweep, after the MVP, and after a full tournament where the numbers kept screaming the same answer, it is getting very hard to argue otherwise. She was not just part of the machine, she was the piece that made it work. If you're still watching, drop "no more bench" in the comments.